Howdy. Hey, Daniel. Let me know if you can hear this. So, are you able to hear what I'm talking here? Testing 3. One, two, three, 3, 2, 1. Somebody in the comments let me know if they can hear or not. All right. Yeah. Yeah, a little meter, I guess, that would show sound isn't moving, so I can't tell if it was actually making sound, but I guess you guys can hear. So this is first time trying this here, so bear with me from a technical standpoint if there's any issues. But we'll wait a few minutes. Official start time is supposed to be at 4 o'clock, so we'll wait a few minutes, let other people join in. But basically, just trying this out. Got a couple of topics on mind. One is going to be what are some of my favorite vintage kits. Pulled some of them from the collection, and then am I taking orders? Yeah, it's down the street, so maybe afterwards I might go and get some. And so show you guys some of the vintage kits that are some of my favorites, and tell you a little bit why they're my favorites. And then after that, then we'll just kind of open it up for like a Q&A. What if you guys got questions about the channel, about vintage kits, about me and how I got involved with this, kind of an open forum question and answer as best I can. And so that'll be kind of where we're going with it today. And then future ones, we'll have a little bit more specific topics again. As what I'm going to try to do is be able to bring in other people onto the chat as well. Let's try to figure that out. You have to use third-party software for that, and I'm not very tech savvy when it comes to this stuff. So hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to get it figured out so that way we can bring in other people. So it's not just me sitting here talking and boring you guys. So looks like we're starting to get some more people showing up. So where are all you guys at? Where are you guys watching from? JM with the quips. Shangri-La. Got any B-25s parked next to you? Got some snow in Delaware. Hey, Steve. South Carolina, Virginia. New Jersey, North Carolina, another Virginia. Pandemonium. All right. So, well, welcome to the first live stream. Again, apologize for any kind of technical issues with this. Just using my laptop and the camera on the laptop and the microphone on here. This seems to work out. Probably invest a little bit of money into something a little better. But just to get things started, we'll just use what's built in here, and down the road we'll be able to use some third-party software to be able to bring in other people onto the live chat as well. But so today I thought a couple of topics would be just kind of a review of some of the kits that I find are some of my favorites out of my collection. And then after kind of going through some of that, then open it up to like a Q&A session of any questions you guys might have of me, or of vintage models, the channel, whatnot, and then kind of go from there. So we'll start out with got a stack of kits here. So this first one here, the there we go. Got to think backwards. The Brewster Buffalo from Matchbox, and this is this particular one's a second issue box, so it's got the little window of happiness on the back. But I always like the Buffalo. I've got a lot of different Buffalo kits, and the Matchbox version of it's kind of neat because it comes with decals for the Dutch version and for British New Zealand version as well. And I actually, some of you guys may have seen a build video of this one, which is of this Dutch version of the Buffalo. So there's a full build video on the channel of this guy. Built pretty much just straight from the box. The only modifications I did to it was drilling out the gun barrels, both on the cowling and in the wing. But these are the kit decals that are supplied, and they went on fairly well. So even though this is a kit from the 70s, decals were still usable. I find that with the Matchbox kits, their decals are a little thick. But they seem to have lasted over the years. So don't be afraid of buying old vintage Matchbox kits. They go together nicely still, and the decals are still typically usable. Let's see. Very nice. Matchbox near my heart. Always good with the multicolored trees. Yeah, this particular issue is what I've heard called the strawberries and cream, kind of this orangey reddish color and an off-white color. It was later issued in a brown and green version, but the first ones are the strawberries and cream ones. Some of the colors that they issued them are kind of neat. Like I built their P12, and the P12 is molded in the green and kind of chrome yellow, and matches up pretty good to what the actual aircraft colors were. So you just need a little bit of detail painting, and you can just leave it in the plastic, and it looks pretty good. So, and some of them have some odd choices like that, strawberries and cream. Now let's see what else I got here. All right, so next one's one of my favorites is the Airfix Hampton. And the first time I got this was when I was probably about 7, 8 years old. Wasn't really familiar with it, but it was a kind of a neat airplane. And when I would get kits, sometimes I wouldn't know what too much about the airplane. I was just buying a kit because it was cheap, and This one had some pretty neat looking box art. Good old Roy Cross. Could really suck you into buying just about anything Airfix would make. And the Hampton's a pretty cool looking plane. It's really different looking, and did build it. It's typical '60s, Airfix, heavy rivets and minimal amount of interior detail, but just enough to satisfy a 7, 8 year old. And I am definitely going to be rebuilding that one again. Let's see, it was good. Modified color, Canberra. Always loved variety Matchbox. Yeah, Matchbox. He always did some kind of obscure stuff. I mean, they did Mustangs and Corsairs, but they also spent a lot of time making some really obscure stuff that in a lot of cases that was the only kit available of that. Say like the PB2 or PB4Y, yeah, PB4Y Privateer. They were the only ones that made something like that. The Vickers Wellesley. I think still they're the only ones making a kit of that. So they would do a lot of obscure stuff, which was kind of neat. That's another one of my favorites. Let's see. Now this one here, have done a video on this one. This is the old ITC kit that when ITC decided to pull out of doing model kits, they were already boxed under this Ringo name. I'm not sure if Ringo was actually owned by ITC or if it was a separate company, but almost whatever was left over stock wise ended up going under the Ringo name. So aside from being kind of a again another obscurish kind of kit, the thing that I really liked about it is the base that came with it. And so it's a float plane, and the stand, I should say. Let's see. So the stand was made to look like there it goes, like a wave. So it kind of looks like it's taken off of the water. And in fact, the earlier issues of it, this was actually in a bluish color, clear blue. I thought that was just fantastic. So I'm going to try to get myself an earlier version of the kit. In fact, you can see where the ITC name's been scrubbed off of the mold. There we go. Yeah, there you can see it. So they just scratched off the ITC name off of there. But I'm going to try to find an actual ITC version to get the blue color stand. I think that's really neat. And so, it's an okay model. I mean, it's not the best model in the world. It's an off scale. It's not completely accurate as far as its details go. It's not any one particular model of the duck. It's kind of a mishmash of different versions, but still, kind of a neat kit and some okay box art. So let's see. Yeah, the Privateers, the classic kit. The longest time they were the only ones to do an F-86A. Yeah. Are there ads popping up on this? Anyone remember the Aurora Pratt Patrol kit? Ringo was a separate company. Okay, Steve, appreciate the info on that. It's a cool stand. Oh man, ads. Okay. I don't know if I can. Let's see if there's something I can do about that. Stream. Made for kids, paid promotions, altered content. I think it's under monetization. I think I may have cured the ad problem. Dating apps, huh? Okay, so I got hit with two ads. All right, so I switched it to manual. So hopefully that will take care of the problem. Um, we'll have to pitch by a real estate agent in Cucamonga. All right. Okay, so let's see if that change has any effect on it. Let's see. Next kit. So this one here. This is Pyro. This is the Hall Springfield Bulldog. It's one of the Thompson Trophy racers, and there is a full video on this one. I wasn't expecting this kit to be as neat as it was. Pyro is not really known for aircraft kits. They make some of the more a lot of cars. They make pistols, a lot of other stuff, but they don't really make a lot in aircraft kits. So was not expecting this to be much of a kit, but it's actually fairly decent. And again, of one of these really obscure aircraft. They've got pretty nice detail on it on the surface, good fabric covering representation and stuff. And this is one that really no other maker was producing a kit of this until the Williams Brothers in the 70s. That's Williams Brothers, and you got to deal with Williams Brothers. The only problem with it, well, not really much of a problem, but this is the pilot they give you, and when you compare it to the size of the fuselage, this is a racer. This is about 32nd scale. So this guy is maybe a 48 scale. So if you're going to want to put a pilot in there, you got to do something else with it. But overall, it's really a neat little kit. Was very surprised, and this is something that I will build at some point as well, because I think it's just a really sharp looking airplane. Hey, Christopher. Let's see. Yeah. I think there's the Williams Brothers one, and I think there may be a limited run, like a resin kit that's out there, and more like a 72nd scale. All right. So sounds like they're doing some plumbing work next door. So if you hear something. All right. Next one up is the Revell Warhawk. There's a video on the channel on this one, and what makes this one one of my favorites is this was my very first model kit to build. I built this with my dad. I think he probably did a lot more building, but I do recall doing some painting with some Testors bottle cement, and this was tube glued, and I had it for a long time. It may still exist somewhere in some of my stuff, but this was a really neat kit. And for its time period, I think this thing originally was molded in like 63 or so. It's actually a pretty nice little kit. A lot of these little 72nd scale kits from Revell were actually produced by Revell of Great Britain. And the shape is really good on them. The surface detail is pretty nice. Little heavy on the rivets on some of them, for the scale, but it's not like 60s Airfix heavy. And they're really nice little delicate kits. So of course, there's a lot more sophisticated kits of a P40 today. But for its day, this was a fantastic little kit, and I'm gonna get another one of these. I want to keep one in a box just because of what it is, for me personally. But I do want to get another one of these. I can rebuild it again, with some tube glue and some testers and enamel. So let's see. Definitely go for some in and out. Yeah, I think I might hit it out afterwards. Real Hawk was a good kit. At least on P40. Yeah, they issued that a lot. Good. Vintage monogram Lightbox P38 arrives tomorrow. Oh yeah. Yeah, Mark, that's a fantastic kit. Go work on good memories. Yep. All right. So next one up will be the Impact Fury, and this is a fairly recent addition to the collection. I was not all that familiar with Impact. I knew that they were reissued on a Pyro, but hadn't really seen much of those. But recently ended up with the whole set of the original Impact kits, and I think you may have seen the review that I did recently on the Impact Fury Flycatcher, I think it was, and was very, very surprised at how good these kits are. I mean, they're exquisitely made. You get like a 4 or 5 piece pilot. The surface detail is fantastic. You get interior parts and stuff. I mean, their fabric representation on there is just gorgeous. Some inscribed panel lines. It's a really, really nice kit. So you combine that with the Fury itself, which is probably one of the most beautiful biplanes ever made, and you got yourself a fantastic kit. And this one still has. They even gave you the rigging stuff to make your rigging. Pretty decent decals. Looks like these are yellowed a bit, so these could probably still be used. But a really, really nice kit. So I know a few of these have been reissued by Lindbergh. Ended up with, after Pyro went belly up, Lindbergh ended up with the molds, and some of them have been reissued through Lindbergh, and you can still get them. So I highly recommend any one of the kits from this series. Definitely a good choice. Let's see here. Revell Spitfire Mark II. Yeah, I built this Revell 72nd Spitfire Mark II. I remember it being really thin, like kind of flimsy. Probably very accurate as far as the thickness of the wings, but for little 72nd scale kit that you're going to play around with when you're a kid, it seemed awfully delicate. Fury, which I thought was originally from Pyro, was done originally by Impact. So yeah, so Pyro got the molds when Impact folded. So there was a series of interwar biplanes. There was the Gladiator, the Bulldog, and the Flycatcher were part of this series, and then they also did this before World War One series. That was kind of tied into the Magnificent Men and their flying machines. Let's see, there's an Avro triplane, Bristol box kite, Avro biplane, a Deparue Sun, a Martin Handicide, and a Blériot. And these kits also ended up going to Pyro, and some of those have been reissued recently by Lindbergh as well. So really, really nice kits. Highly, highly recommend those. Monogram naval planes. Yeah, we'll be getting to the monogram naval planes. I guess it was. Hey, Chef. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Okay, so what's next? Go to the Frog B26 Marauder. And I think this is just kind of an interesting looking box, the way that their layout was done. It's hard to see on the camera, but this is like a silver printed part on here. You have in the 3 view of the Mediterranean version of the Marauder. I think is kind of neat. Molded in polystyrene. Still, this is early 60s. They're still making sure that it's not a wood kit. And what's also kind of neat about this one is it's molded in this kind of duck egg blue color. It doesn't really show on the camera here, but it's that duck egg blue, duck egg green, the early war RAF underside color, which is kind of neat. Doesn't match up to any color scheme, of course, because the color scheme for the Mediterranean, it would have been azure blue underneath, that middle stone and dark earth, and the underside would have been wrong side. The underside here would have been in that azure blue. So nice kit. Probably one of the best B26 kits that was available at the time. The Airfix one is just I never liked that kit. It just felt too fussy. It just didn't seem like it was captured the gracefulness of the Marauder. The Revell version was awful. One that was kind of good was the Revell. I think it was Revell, or was it Monogram? They made a snap tight of the B26 and 72nd scale, and it was of the early pointed tail version, short wing, almost flat angle of incidence on the wing, and it's actually a very nice kit. Even though it's a snap together kit, it's a very nice kit, and they command some pretty high prices because it's really about the only early model Marauder that was available forever, and it's one that I want to add back to the collection if I can come across one at a reasonable price at some point. Let's see. You guys are going at it in the comment section. Yeah, so it was the Monogram that did the snap kit. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that Valum or Valam or however you pronounce it, that it's not a very good kit. That the snap tight one is actually a pretty good one. Okay, so what else we got? Continuing with Frog, we got 3 different issues of the Fokker D21, which, again, this is one of those that, this is really about the only kit available for quite a while. And I've got a kind of a soft spot for some Dutch aircraft. And there's this version of it. And then there's the Airlines version with some pretty neat box art. And then this later version, and it's got on the bottom side this nice sort of 3 view of it. So I'll be building a few of these, as you can probably guess. Got some aftermarket decals to go on these. So those will get a nice build. So Steve, was the first kit I built was that Revell P40 that showed a little bit ago. That was the first kit that I built with my dad, and so that's where that has kind of a special place for me as being my first model. All right, next up is that good old IMC Battle Damage, and never built one of these when I was a kid. Always saw them, always thought they were cool, but just never could pull the trigger on it because they're made. At the time they were modern kits. When I was more into World War II kits, I really didn't build much as far as jets and things. So I never actually got one. But I've recently been able to acquire all the different releases. And again, IMC was one of those companies that made cars, made other stuff, and this was really about one of their only forays into aircraft. And they apparently cheated, because this Skyraider kit is a ripoff of Monogram, and got a full video on comparing the two kits and the story behind it. But in a nutshell, Monogram figured out that they'd ripped off their kit and actually sued them. And IMC didn't bother to show up in court, so they won by default. And when you compare the two kits, even though this is a single seater and the Monogram was the four seater, you can tell that they totally ripped it off. They also hit them for the F-105 Thunder Chief, which I've got those as well. I'll be doing a comparison of those kits, but you can clearly see that they're straight ripoffs. And then when you look at some of the aircraft in the IMC series, the style of build and the quality of them changes dramatically from one to another. So I have a feeling that some of the other kits, like the F4 and the MiG-21, were probably ripoffs of somebody else's kit. They just didn't realize it. So they're still pretty neat. The battle damage parts, especially for a kid, or a less advanced modeler, being able to get something that's kind of got this stuff already built into it is kind of cool. And you do some good painting on it. These look really nice. Some of our viewer build videos, there's been some guys have submitted some pictures of built ones that they've done, and they actually come out really nice. So not the greatest kits in the world, but for late 60s, pretty decent, and very unique. So if you want to build something kind of different, highly recommend any one of these IMC series. Now, the molds ended up with Lindbergh. So Lindbergh releases them every once in a while. The only ones that they don't release, of course, are the Skyraider and the F-105. As part of that lawsuit, they couldn't do anything with those. So, but the other ones, the RF-4, the A4 Skyhawk, what else do they make? The MiG-21 and the Super Sabre. All of those will get occasional re-releases through Lindbergh, and in some cases, I've seen them doing double kits. And so they're relatively inexpensive, so it's a good way to get a couple of vintage kits for cheaper price. And they still do include the battle damage parts in them when they do release them. So good option instead of buying one of the old originals. All right, next up, F-105 from Aurora. Get the whole thing in there for you. This is just fantastic. The kit itself is really based off of the pre-production prototypes. So it's not the most accurate kit in the world. Aurora was not known for their accuracy, especially when it was a new aircraft that had come out. They usually would go off of some tiny little drawing in Aviation Weekly or something and pop out a kit, as quickly as they could to beat everybody to market. So it's not the most accurate kit in the world, but man, you gotta love that box art, and just the overall look. It's molded in, the fantastic silver plastic. It's just a sexy looking, kit, but not accurate in any way, shape, or form. They did get the area rule fuselage, on it, but the monogram and Revell kits that came out shortly after around this time are much more accurate kits than this one. Then, of course, in the late '60s, Hasegawa brought out their F-105, which just blew all the other ones away. So let's see. Or rush to market. Lead sled B model. All right. So what else we got here? Hawk. Hawk, I think, is an underrated company. They made some blah kits, but they made some very, very nice kits as well too. This P-47 that they produced is almost as good as the little bit later monogram one that everyone raves about. But this is actually a really good model, and you could build it in both Razorback or bubble top versions, which took a while before Monogram did their Razorback version. But what's really cool about some issues of this Monogram kit, or I'm sorry, Hawk kit, are the plated ones. And these plated ones have full chrome plated parts, or actually aluminum anodizing. And what was cool about it is hopefully you can see this, is that they treated the surfaces differently. So it would take the plating differently on the different parts. So you actually got this, what people spend hours and hours trying to do with paint, with different color or different shades of metal for all the various different panels, was part of the kit itself. And they did this with a number of their 48 scale kits, in the '60s, all the way through when testers bought them. Some of the testers releases, even the '70s, photo box, still have some plated kits in them. So, the P-47 one itself, I think is, really, really well done. And this is definitely going to be getting a build, because I want to see one of these built up in just the, the raw plated look. So, yeah, it's a neat box too. It's got all kinds of stuff on it. They really spent a lot of time doing their instruction sheet with a lot of history. Really, really nice kits. Yeah, have any of you guys built one of the plated kits? No, the Hawk Interwar racers. Yeah, we did. I did a racer week and featured some of those Hawk racers. It's hard to believe those were actually some of the very first model kits ever made. The Curtis Racer is the first model kit, plastic model kit that Hawk made, and is considered, by a lot of people to be, the first American, plastic airplane kit. Let's see. Door models by Hawk models. No, Hawk was purchased by testers. Chrome plated U2 and F5. So Duncan, you built the U2 in with the plating. I bet that looked really cool. Yeah, I'm gonna be building. I've got a couple of the plated kits. So I'm gonna be building some of those at some point here as well. So I really want to see how those come out. All right. Let's see here. Next up, the big one. It's the Revell 132nd scale Hawker Typhoon and the markings of Roland Beaumont. This was kind of a mythical kit for me for quite a while. The local hobby shop that I went to as a kid was called Military Hobbies, and in their display case they had one of these built up, and it was really well assembled. And the Typhoon, at some point in the late 70s, early 80s, became one of my favorite aircraft, if not the favorite aircraft. And the pilot, Roland Beaumont, who was very successful in getting the Typhoon its recognition, and finding it to be a very good ground attack aircraft, and kept it alive. I just loved that kit, and by that time, it was not available anymore. Revell stopped making them, and for some reason, there just wasn't any of them around anywhere. And it wasn't until mid '80s when Revell was doing their History Makers series that they re-released it. And so I was able to get a hold of one of those, and then that particular boxing that I just showed you is the original boxing. So I found one of those at a kit collector show not too long ago. So I've actually got about 3 of them now, and so I'll be doing a build on that. And my dad got me the Airfix 124 scale one a couple of years ago, and that is a pretty fantastic kit. A little scary, how detailed it is. And what's kept me from building that one for sure is where am I going to put it? It is huge. But I get around to assembling that one, after maybe I get my modeling skills up a little bit, I'll tackle that and find some place to put it. All right, so that was that one. And then next up, this is a Dream Kit. So this is Dick Trickle's 69 Mustang Super Stocker. Dick Trickle's one of my favorite drivers in auto racing, track veteran, racing legend, winner of over 1,500 feature races. He is the man. And this particular kit was issued once by MPC, and supposedly they trashed the mold to make the street stock version. Kind of odd. Usually you have the street version first and then you make the race car out of it. But in this case, they made the race car first and then turned the mold into a street wall. So this kit is super rare. And, I look for, forever. I have yet to see one at the kit collector show that I go to, in 25, 30 years ago, except for this. But unfortunately, this is an empty box. So got myself a kit, or I got myself a box, and but I do not have the kit itself, and it doesn't look like there's any hope of it being reissued. I got some signed Dick Trickle cards in here, and the old White Knight felt banner from the 60s, early 70s. So this kit shows up online every once in a while. When I was first looking for it, they were selling for like $150 or something. I thought, man, no way in hell am I ever spending $150 on a plastic model kit. I'll just find one somewhere. Well, now they're selling north of 300. So I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get one, but one day, I'll come across one. If any of you guys out there in the model world, have one, finds its way to the channel. Be greatly indebted. All right, let's see. Germans on the ground hated Typhoon like Allied troops hated the Stuka. Yeah, Typhoon, man, when it would show up, everyone would, bail out of their tanks, even though it really turns out that, they actually didn't knock out that many tanks. They knocked out a hell of a lot of soft skins vehicles. But actually knocking out, a Tiger tank or even a Panzer IV or something like that didn't actually happen much, but it was enough to scare them so they wouldn't drive around during the day. Let's see. NPC race car kit. I think I'll puke. Yeah, Steve, you don't like NPC, do you? Oh, I had no idea. Everybody, Dick Trickle's machine except for the Miller Buick. Yeah, the Miller Buick. I built that one. That and Bobby Allison's version. Yeah, the Airfix 124 scale ones, when they came out, in the 70s, they were, about as good of a kit as you could get. Nowadays, they definitely are lacking, those original ones, but now they've, started making some newer ones, and they're, pretty good kits. Yeah, the shelf space definitely factors into building some of these big ones. Yeah, Beaumont wrote a bunch of books about all. Yeah. He was he ended up being test pilot after the war. He was the first pilot to fly the what became the Lightning, the English Electric Lightning. The P was a P1 or P2, P1B. Flew the TSR2, the Canberra. In fact, he's actually the first British pilot to exceed the speed of sound when he was over at Edwards flying F-86s in a dive. He was able to break the sound barrier in a dive with an F-86. And let's see. Okay, so next, the Aurora Panther Jet. Got a couple of vids on this one. The kit itself, and then some build ones. I've done a couple of restorations on some built ones. And the story behind this is one of the first two kits that Aurora produced, and it's a stolen Hawk kit. They stole this one and the XF90 and just straight out ripped it off. And there's a little bit of kerfuffle about it. Supposedly, Hawk after that started putting Hawk's name in Morse code in the rivets on their kits. Not sure how accurate that is, but this ended up being a mainstay kit for Aurora for quite a while. And there's about 3 different box art versions of this. This being the last one, but they carried this on for quite a while in their lineup. And when I was a kid, Bridget at Toko-Ri was one of my favorite movies, and so this Aurora Panther Jet really kind of epitomized that look. And so it's about as simple a kit as you can get. There's not much parts to it. Relatively accurate in its shape, probably because they ripped it off of Hawk instead of doing it themselves. Hawk was, generally pretty good about their stuff, but it's, the usual old raised markings, panel lines. There's nothing as far as, gear. In fact, the first issue of the kit didn't even have landing gear or rockets. It was just the plane itself. The wing is a solid one piece. Tail is just one solid piece. You take away the gear and rockets, and there's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts to this kit. a couple more if you have the tip tanks. So a little bit of a historical kit, but I won this as a door prize at one of the kit collectors shows, and this is probably late 70s or so. Never built it because I thought, man, this is a crap kit. Even then I knew, that raised markings were bad, if you're going to try to build a good model. So I never built it, just sat in a drawer forever. And, now here I am, just loving this kit. The box art is fantastic. And, just it's one of my favorite kits. If I had to just pick one model kit to save forever and ever, it'd probably be this one. Let's see. John Arena, Turbine Car. It's nice. 30-second scale B25. 30-second scale B25. Jesus, man. I've seen that somebody's made a 30-second scale B17 and a B24 and a Lancaster. Where are you putting that stuff? So, yeah, JN, that was Hawk that they'd copied. Well, it's kind of funny is that some of the Hawk or the Aurora kits ended up getting ripped off by the Japanese makers. You ripped off a lot of their kits, and particularly the World War I biplanes or the interwar aircraft. Same thing with the Italians; they ripped them off too. So I guess they figured, oh, they're on the other side of the world; they'll never notice that. But eventually, those kits ended up getting bought. Those molds were acquired by other companies and re-released back into the States. So you would see like the NTEX F4B is a Marathon kit, which that Marathon kit is a ripoff of the Aurora kit. So now you got the NTEX one being sold here in the States, right up against the Aurora F4B. Working on the Hasagawa Panther for Royce Williams. Yeah. I've got a link in my my posts for an interview with Royce, and if you don't know his story, it's pretty fantastic. I mean, this guy officially, I think, was now credited with four victories, but realistically, I think he ended up shooting down 6 because the Soviets are saying that only one of the 7 MiG-15s that went out came back. So that sounds like 6 kills to me. But it's one of the longest dogfights in history. And so here you got Royce, in a Panther going up against 7 MiG-15s, and he manages to shoot down almost all of them and survive a 30-minute dogfight and got back to the carrier with just fumes, left in the gas tank. So, all right, so that's that one. Another Aurora kit, which I think is a really nice kit, is this one here. This is their Helldiver. I've done a video on this one. It's part of their Interwar series. They did this. They did a P-12, a P-6, and the F-4B. I think they did the M2 mail plane as well, and a Jenny. I think a Jenny. Fantastic kit. We on the one hand, you see like that F-105, which is just kind of looks like the airplane, if you squint and look from a distance. But this Helldiver is a fantastic kit. It's an off scale. It's supposed to be 48 scale, but it's a little larger than that. And it's got it's got movable parts, control surfaces, wheel, all that stuff. But it's actually very well detailed. Has a relatively complete cockpit. Um, it's really nicely done. The only thing that really kind of mars it is it still has raised markings on it. But like for example, like this is the instrument panel on it. Right. I mean, when do you see an instrument panel like this in a mid 50s kit? It's really really well done. So I've got a couple of these now. This particular one here is in about as mint condition as you can get from the first issue. Still has the tissue inside. So this one I think I'm going to save as is. Has the old style or logo here. So this one I'm going to save as is, but I've got another one that I am going to build. It's a really, really nice kit. All right, let's see. Royce got his rage on. Yes, he did. Somebody's making a 32nd scale Navy catapult. Okay. Be nice if I don't know, somebody makes a 48 scale one, because I know there's a number of good U.S. Navy aircraft that would look good on a catapult that are quarter scale. Catapults 3D printed. Heller and Matchbox, Helldivers. Yeah, I've got those as well too. They're okay kits. I think the Matchbox one is going to assemble well. Matchbox, their their biplanes go together really really nicely. They really engineered their kits very well, and they go together very very nicely. Um, let's see. Okay. All right. Oh, so they do make the catapult and the other scales, but they're all 3D printed. Okay. Like you have to print it yourself, or you can order the kit. All right. And then speaking of which, when we're talking about Navy stuff, this is kind of a group. So we got the Monogram Corsair, Helldiver, Hellcat, Avenger, and finally the Dauntless. This is one of my all-time favorite builds. I built this a few times. This series from Monogram were fantastic kits. They had the right balance of accuracy, as much as they could at the time, and playability. As a kid, nothing was better than taking your Dauntless around the house and spreading those dive flaps and dive bombing the cat, man. Or the Avenger, dropping torpedo into the tub or something, man. These were fantastic kits, and and I think the fact that they're still being released, under Revell's name, they kind of downplay all the features on them, but they're still being released by Revell. Here we are, 70 years later, 70, yeah, because these came out late 58 or late 50s, so yeah, we're talking 70 years on these things. And they're still fun builds. I just made the Hellcat. Did a build video on the Hellcat a few months ago, and it's they go together very well. You got to be pay attention to the working parts. You just can't just slap it together. So you got to pay attention to what you're doing. But it's not like it's a miracle that it works. Even as a kid, every one of these, I got all the parts to work. Even as a kid building these, so they're not difficult to do. You just gotta pay attention. But Dauntless, man, this one in particular is out of all of them, this is my favorite. And there's also they also did a Wildcat too, which I never built the Wildcat. Is Didn't realize that the Wildcat had folding wings and everything, just like these other ones did. Really wasn't the 70s boxing didn't really point that out too much. Okay, getting towards the end here. Let's see. I think this one here will please a lot of people. The Revell B17 with the freaking one of the probably the greatest box art. The Jack Linwood Memphis Belle box art, man. You just don't get any better than that. Not the greatest kit in the world, but man, was it fun to build. The shape is pretty good. The details are really, really poor. Some sacrifices are made for some of the movable parts on this. The turrets and the guns and stuff are just awful. But the overall shape is actually really, really good. A little heavy on the rivets, but man, it's just a fun build. I think this is one of the kits that almost every builder of a certain age built one of these. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's just done so well. Just beautiful. It's got the rivets on it, but they're not, giant Airfix rivets. They're still out of scale, of course. And there's Zippo for an interior. I mean, I think the only interior thing is there's a slab here with a couple of seats on it. And then the turrets are just stuck on. The details are blah. But the overall shape and just the funness of this kit was really nice. The representation of the superchargers, is really pretty good. If you really wanted to detail up this thing, you can make this kit look really good if you really put some effort in it. Of course, you can buy a more modern Hasegawa or the modern Revell issue. But you're going to have as much fun as this one. Plus, you're not going to get a Linwood box art, which that's half the kit right there is the Linwood box art. All right. How many of you guys have built that one? Let's see. 48 scale monograms. Yeah, like the song, You Drop a Bomb on Me. Built the monogram Wildcat, the Avenger. The kitchen table, yeah. Monogram Wildcat, got the wings to work, and I laid down a perfect brush paint. And Pactra. Yeah, Steve, you need to talk round two. If they're buying up all kinds of stuff, I don't know how much you have any connection with round two. I know you talk a lot with the guys or worked with the guys at Atlantis. You got any pullover at round two? Tell them to buy testers off of Rust-Oleum so they can bring back Pactra and the old formula and the Model Master paints. We need those back, man. Or maybe Atlantis can do it. I don't know how much ability Atlantis might have on that, but This bell starting to mess up. Hey, Sarah, I appreciate you popping in. Well, it's pretty late for you over there. Still have the instruction sheet for your first Memphis bell. Yeah, I still have the cutout box top for my first one. And let's see, the B-24. Yeah, they're the early B-24 they made. That's actually available through Atlanta, so they've reissued that one. EPA killed those old enamel paint formulas. Yeah. Yeah. Only if they're going to do them in the original. Yeah, like when testers, they killed Pactra. I don't know if it was because as JM was talking about, if there were some EPA issues with the formulations that Pactra was using. But when they bought Pactra, then they ended up killing off the original Pactra line. They started issuing a series of acrylics under the name of Pactra, and they were just crap. But those Model Masters, those were really good. But Pactra, man, yeah, Flowcoil, Polyas, man, yeah, there were some great paints, man. I still have a few bottles of some of these, and some of them are actually still usable. I've actually got some testers in the little glass jar, little glass bottle that my dad had from like the 60s and 70s. They've got like 5 cents on the lid, and they're still usable. All right, last couple kits. This one here, the Aurora B-26 Marauder. This is one of the earlier boxings, not the first boxing, but one of the earlier boxings. This was, I believe, the second kit I built. I tried to build it on my own. I thought, hey, I just built that P40, and so I'd gotten one of these for Christmas in the mid '70s, and I thought I could build it all on my own, which of course I couldn't, and just glue bomb the hell out of the thing. And then my dad saved it, kind of repainting it, redoing it. I'd used the tester's glue, the tube glue stuff on all the clear parts, which all frosted. So he ended up painting them silver and repaint the frames and stuff. And this thing, it's about quarter scale. It's a little off, of course. It's a little bit of monogram box scale or Aurora box scale, but it's a little larger than quarter scale, I believe. But this sucker's just beefy. I mean, it's so thick and heavy. And I used to play around with this in the backyard forever. You just could not destroy this thing. The props and the guns, those broke off, but the main kit itself, I mean, look at that wing attachment. It's just one beefy kit. So it's one of my favorites just because of all the playtime it went through. Not the greatest kit in the world, but very sentimental to me. A real fun kit. All right. Original Poly and Model Master. Yeah. Widowmaker. The Baltimore Horde had no visible means of support. Supposedly, Jimmy Doolittle went down to Tampa Bay, which is where they were training a lot of the B-26 crews, and of course, everyone was all freaking out, calling the Widowmaker, one a day in Tampa Bay and stuff. And so Jimmy Doolittle goes down there and shows them that you guys are a bunch of wussies. And so he gets into one of the short wing B-26s, takes off, kills the engine, and does a roll right off of the runway. Just really showed these guys up that yeah, you could fly this thing. It wasn't dangerous to anybody unless you thought that it was. So you had to treat it a little differently, but it was not as dangerous as people thought it was. Of course, they made changes to it, changed the angle of incidence of the wing, extended the wing out, extended the tail, increased the power, all kinds of stuff that dirtied up the aircraft. So instead of being this, 350, 400 mile an hour hot ship, they dropped it down to, somewhere, around 300 miles an hour. So it wasn't as awesome as it was, but it was still a great airplane. Yeah, you know what surprises me, Annie Mouse, is there hasn't been a movie on Doolittle for I mean, this guy, he was one of the greatest pilots of all time. Set records, did all kinds of great stuff. Was a wartime commander, the Doolittle raid. I mean, all this stuff. Just a great American, a great pilot. And you'd think that there would be some sort of a movie about him, but there hasn't been. That's something that I wish Hollywood would do. I mean, the most recent portrayal of Doolittle's been Aaron Eckhart and what's his name, Alec Baldwin, of all people. Alec Baldwin is playing Jimmy Doolittle. I mean, you couldn't get the most opposite person. Um, which is really sad. So somebody needs to make a life story of Jimmy Doolittle. That would be worth it. All right, final kits of my favorite stash. Uh, Penske Allison Race Team by AMT. As you've seen some of my videos, know that Bobby Allison is him and Dick Trickle are my favorite drivers. When I was a kid, Bobby Allison, mid 70s, was driving this AMC Coca-Cola Matador in red, white, and blue. Man, it was bicentennial. You couldn't get more American than that. And I got that kit when I was a kid for Christmas. It was way beyond my ability to build, so I tried starting it a few times, and was just botching it up. But it ended up, being a drawer sitter for a long time, and then at some point just kind of disappeared. So a few years ago, at one of the kit collector shows, one showed up, and my dad, got it for me. So now I've got one back in my collection again, and I've built a few of the individual cars. The Matador was seems to be a constant reissue from AMT, but the team was only issued, I think twice, and so it's pretty rare to get the full team set. But at some point, I think I will build the whole team now that I've got some more skills. And I practice on a few of the individual cars. I think I will do a full team. So that's my collection, or that's the out of my collection that I view as some of my favorite kits of all time. The only real kit that's out there that I absolutely still want to get is that Dick Trickle Mustang. Most of there's a lot of kits out there that I would enjoy having in my collection, But as far as like, oh, that's the kit I am absolutely looking for and I want, is still that Dick Trickle Mustang. But pretty much, I've got the ones that I absolutely want. Of course, there's a lot of neat kits out there. There's still, a lot of really cool Aurora kits, a lot of other ones. Um, that there's some, some more obscure stuff. Like the one that Max was showing the other day of the that helicopter. That was a pretty neat kit. That's a nice one to have in the collection. It's not one that I've been, oh, I'm seeking that out. I got to have it. So, anyway, all right. So that's enough of the show and tell. Take a look at the last few chat stuff. Let's see. Daniel, the B-26 by Airlines, that's a frog kit. So that's the one that I showed earlier. There should be, unless you don't count the. Well, the Doolittle Raid movie, that was if you're talking about like 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, that's a fantastic movie. It wasn't really focused on Jimmy Doolittle. It does, the raid itself, was kind of, put together by him, and the training and stuff that was done. And, but it's not really focused on him. I'd like to see something that, kind of follows his life, that would be neat. Same thing with Chuck Yeager. Yeager as well. Right Stuff did a pretty good job of showing him, but left out a lot. Let's see. The G.I. Joe Doolittle. And it was a Pandemonium. Thanks, Pandemonium. I appreciate the super chat. Don't forget to remind everyone. Oh yeah, everybody hit the like button. Hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell. That's nice stuff. Enjoyable. Give us an earlier warning for the next one. Yeah. I'm not going to be doing this, on like a weekly schedule like Max does. Maybe once a month. I don't have that kind of time. I'm not retired like Max, so. But I'll have some other topics, and I mentioned at the very beginning. This is the first effort at this, so I'm just using the YouTube platform for it, and so it limits me to just my camera. There are ways that I can bring in other people, of course, which I'll be doing at some point down the road as well, and maybe get a little bit more of a schedule. Give you guys more heads up when we do these things. Let's see. Built a Matador. My first attempt at masking different colors. Yeah. Well, that's if you're gonna be doing masking, that's one of the easiest kits to do. Red, white, and blue, and it's just boom, 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 straight block colors. Steve, I don't want to see any NPC car kits ever. Man, Steve, you just hate those NPCs, man. Quite the collection. Thanks for sharing. If you have the time, not sure how far the drive would be for you. Take Max to Chino for the Warbirds. That's really going to be up to Max. We got. He comes in on Friday, I believe. And I offered to be able to drive him around on Saturday and Sunday, so I got to work. So I'm not sure what he's got lined up. And then, of course, Sunday is going to be, the kit show. So I don't know if there's going to be time to be able to get out to Chino for him. Um, do board. A lot of senior officers disliked him. Yeah. Once a month's perfect. Don't remember the duo board. Good first live stream. Max 8, the only one retired. That comes from an old AMT sales manager and a builder who hates their kits. Yeah. All right. Hey, Tommy. Thanks for popping in. All right. So that's all I've got for the kits that I was going to show off. So for the next part, if there are questions, that you guys have, either about the channel, about kits, about me, and just kind of open it up for like kind of a little bit of a Q&A forum for a little bit and uh, see what you guys have to say. And so, why did AMT Ertl buy MPC? Well, Steve, why was that? Probably just to take the MPC kits off the market. I know that's happened. That was part of the reason why Monogram acquired the Aurora line. It wasn't so much that they wanted to incorporate the kits into their line, but it was to get the Aurora kits off the market. Let's see, the MPC reboxings of the Airfix kits. Yeah, so MPC, even when Airfix was, going under the Craftmaster and Airfix of America, MPC was actually popping the plastic for them. As if you look at the inserts that for missing parts, it's actually the MPC address. So later on, they ended up branding them under their own name, and that's where you got the profile series, which gave you some additional decal options on it, which was nice, which Airfix didn't do at the time. Downside of it is that a lot of those decal options didn't match up with the actual model of the kit that they were was in there. But it was nice to get something extra. And then, as you mentioned there was also some of them that came with sets of figures. You get some ground crew guys or things like that. So those MPC kits are nice alternatives to the Airfix issues. Yeah, prints from all the original ones in until the 2006 issue. What was your favorite model that you have ever built? From just what's fun, what was a fun kit to build? I'd say it's the Monogram Dauntless. I really enjoyed that, and I built multiples of that. That if you're going back and building a kit again, I think that's a good indicator of how much you enjoyed that build. So I'd say that's probably my favorite model that I've built. Steve says marriage of convenience for AT by MPC to consolidate shelf space. Yeah, so kind of taking kits off the market, competitor kits. Early teens when MPC had reboxed Airfix as golden opportunity kits. Yeah, I remember those. I actually have a couple of kits from them in that series. You got to collect the points and get kits. Oh, you got 3 free kits out of it. Good. Called U.S. Airfix boxings included the extra figures as well. Okay. Yeah, I remember those U.S. Airfix boxes were awful. Of course, when they were doing the photo boxes, in the 70s, early 80s, and the packaging on those U.S. Airfix issues they were just terrible looking. You'd get some alternative decals in them though, which was nice. Like the A20. I remember getting the A20 kit, and it was the Boston 3 that Airfix had been making for a while, but it did come with pre-war um, Air Corps markings. The airline ones. John, you're getting ads? Okay. How about the rest of you guys? I know when we first started, some of you were mentioning ads were popping up, and I did some adjustments on it. Did that help? Did that reduce the amount of ads that were showing up for you? Yeah, the profile series. What's funny is that in doing a lot of the research, for these kits now, um, it's interesting to see how many kits were relying on the profile series for their decals and markings. So the downside of that is that the profile series wasn't all that accurate sometimes. They're great. They're great little books, but some of their depictions of colors and markings and stuff are not all that great. Um, and in some cases, like the P38 that I just did, um, like three or four of the decal options were in the profile. So sometimes they just got all their decal choices out of whatever was in that profile issue. So C.A. Swain, no ads. It's to change the settings. Okay. Tommy Anderson just made some decals for the F-107. All right, great. Hopefully you can print a set of those for me. I've got two of those now, so one of them is going to get built. Frank Field, you got pop-ups all the way through. Okay. I wonder what the difference is. So the U.S. Airfix boxing of the Grumman float plane with the Coast Guard markings. Yeah, that was one of the nice things. Some of these U.S. Airfix ones, they did gear the new markings that would be included more towards the U.S. one. So if that's what you're looking for, that was great. So Ed Cooley, no ad since the early stream. JM, ad free on Eura. Okay, since did William Green write a lot of the profile series? Yeah, William Green was the author of quite a lot of them, but I don't think he was involved with the artwork that was put in them. They're still good, a good reference. You can they've all been scanned online, so you can get the entire series online. But they're still fun little books, especially some of the obscure stuff. It's nice to get a little 15, 20 page booklet on some really obscure point you don't know anything about. Breakfield, 15 pop-ups for bear skin. Okay. All right. So what you're seeing is you're seeing like something pops up out of the live stream, or there's an actual commercial that runs in the live stream. Tommy, okay, yeah. If you got premium, I think that makes it so you don't get any commercials. Sarah, I thought you went to bed. Airfix will still accept the old flying hours on the passport for getting kits. Oh, interesting. Can I still send in the little piece of paper in there if you're missing parts? Yeah, can I still send that to Airfix and get parts from them? Did you buy a bearskin? Excuse me. It's either inline and interrupting the feed. Okay. Ads pop up over the comments, but not over the video. Okay. 1 million flight hours with Airfix. Yeah. So John, actually, yeah, I remember you checking those out as well. We had a family friend that had a lot of aviation books, and we'd borrow those volumes that they would put 10, 15 of them together were great. For the time, the 60s, early 70s, there wasn't a whole lot else out there. So those profile books, were quintessential for model building in the 60s and 70s for sure. Yeah, Sarah, I'm talking about if I can get replacement parts for my six 50s issued kit. I was just kind of joking about that. Airfix by Craftmaster. So the Airfix by Craftmaster, those were the U.S. Issued Airfix kits in the '60s, and those were done by MPC. Uh, and so you'd be mailing to MPC's address to get your replacement parts on those Craftmasters. But bearskin until they make them yellow. What is a bearskin? I don't even know what a bearskin is. Squadron Signal Publications. Yeah, they're another one of those that they're more '70s. I think of them as like a '70s, '80s, and their in action books. Were really neat too, especially a lot of the drawings that would come with them. They got better over the years. Some of their profiles in there would be pretty nice. Um, and then some of the specials that they would do would be interesting as well. Um, and I think the Squatter Shop still exists, if I'm not mistaken. Sarah, you opened another beer. Okay, that's why you're still up. Okay. The frog kit, you popped up at the three view. The artwork looked a lot like the cover of a couple of reference books I had based on the profile series. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, a lot of these artists, moved around. Like say, like Joe Catula. He's doing all this box art for say like Lindbergh, but at the same time, he's also doing covers of magazines and advertising stuff. Most of these guys who were the illustrators, for these box art, um, that wasn't the only thing they did. It was, they did a lot of other things, because model kits can only pay so much, and they're not coming out all the time. So good commercial artists were doing other stuff, and not necessarily aircraft or vehicles. They'd be doing romance novel covers. They'd be doing an ad for butter, things like that. So line of outerwear. So bearskin's a line of outerwear. Okay. Hoodie that you can wear in the rain, thermal vest, short sterling. Yeah, Christopher Jordan. I have not built the short sterling Airfix kit. Pretty good for details and changes between models. Like when they do the comparisons of the different versions, their line drawing stuff. That's really good for that. Detail and Scale is a good series as well. They've got some excellent drawings in their books, and they've usually got photographs of all the little details of the aircraft, which is good. You have to be a little cautious with that because they're taking pictures of aircraft that are in museums in a lot of cases, and the museum aircraft aren't necessarily representative of the actual production aircraft in all cases. So, especially ones that are flying aircraft, um, a lot of changes are done to an airplane over time. But sometimes they're using a detailed scale, though. They're using production line photographs, things that the original maker of the airplane or vehicle, whatever it was, we were taking reference photos on their production line. So those images you can trust to a certain extent as well. But again, those things change. By mid-war, almost all American aircraft were going from the production factory to a modification center, and they go straight to there, and then they change things on the aircraft before shipping them overseas. So even stuff that's coming off the production line isn't actually what would end up in the combat zone. And then of course all the things that would change in the combat zone. Not the King's Guard. The Squadron Shop is now owned by a guy in Atlanta. Sells some of the old stock Squadron products. I remember Squadron, the green putty was a really good product back in the day. They were good for getting like sheet plastic and stuff. Coldstream Guards, it meant. Ginter Publishing, yeah, those they're definitely known for the Naval Aircraft series, but they also do a series for the U.S. Air Force aircraft as well, mainly 50s, 60s ones. But some of those issues are really, really good. He shows up at the Kit Collector show all the time. Catula did one final cover for Model Airplane News in the 80s, I believe. Yeah, I think you are correct. In fact, I may have that issue. For those of you who may have seen a little quick live stream blurb that I did, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, acquired a whole stack of magazines from the 30s through the 60s, model magazines, and a lot of Catula artwork on the covers of those. And I think one of those was one of those last issues that he did in the 80s. Yeah, magazines are, I mean, no one's buying magazines anymore. So there's hardly any of them around. I mean, there's definitely a consolidation that occurred as well too. Um, there's still a few of them out there. They're still putting out some good stuff, but so much of it's ended up just being kind of rehashes of the same stuff over and over and over again. Man, Frank, you getting another bearskin pop up? Maybe it'll stop if you buy a bearskin. Then you won't get no pop ups. Yeah, Jam, the Wings and Air Power magazines. Yeah, those were great, and I know that Mike Machot, saved them from obscurity or being discontinued. But even when he was running it, they were just basically rerunning a lot of the old articles. Occasionally there'd be something new in there, but a lot of them were just the old articles getting rehashed again. He did certainly add some emphasis on modeling. Those were some of the newer articles, but the majority of the stuff was just the same old articles that were being redone again. Yeah, back in the early 70s, the Wings and Air Power series, those were gold, man. I just bought a lot of Wings Air Power off eBay. It wasn't too expensive, but the shipping, oh yeah, that's the downside of when you're buying stuff like books and magazines. The shipping, because that stuff's so heavy. You used to be able to ship it via media mail, and that would be a lot cheaper. But most of your sellers don't know how to do that, so that's unfortunate. And shipping ends up being kind of the thing that ruins a lot of online stuff. I'm fortunate living here in Southern California. I've got a lot of options of stuff to get. but I rarely buy a lot of stuff online because of the shipping costs. You see a kit, that you're like, ooh, it's $15. That's great. That's a really great price. It's like, half off of what it should be or something. But then you're going to add, 17.99 in shipping, and now and then tax and all that. Now you end up, with a $35 kit again. So, occasionally I'll buy like a group uh, of kits, like as you've seen in some of the unboxings. Some of those are, people are just sending those to me, and but a couple of those unboxings are ones that I've done. But if you notice, there's multiple kits in there. That's where it starts ended up, being okay in some cases, but shipping certainly ruins it. Now, if I was living out in the middle of cornfields in Indiana, um, maybe that's the only way I can get model kits. Okay, then that's something else. But for me, I'm very fortunate. I still have model kit stores around here. I got some fantastic shows that I get to go to, so I don't really have to do a whole lot of online buying. Just pick up copies of the Wings of Empire hobby. Yeah, that's another thing. At the kit shows, there's usually guys selling off a whole mess of magazines too. So that's another place to get them. You have guys selling them for $1 a piece or four for $1. So you can get stacks of magazines. They're pretty cheap. Another resource I think somebody may have mentioned for a lot of these magazines is the library. You can sign up, at your local library, and quite frequently you can get like digital copies of those model magazines. I know my dad does that, and you can peruse some of those. I know he gets like a couple of model magazines out of the UK through his library card. Their online stuff. Fortunately, good magazine rack. Yeah, but Barnes and Noble, especially Borders, and Borders books used to have just a fantastic reference section, and their magazine section was great. Barnes and Noble was just a joke of a bookstore. The old Borders was awesome. Yeah, shipping's a deal killer. Yeah, I agree with you, Pandemonium. Books are more than 7 pounds a cubic foot. Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. If the person doesn't know how to ship them correctly, then it can definitely start adding up very fast. North Bay, Ontario has a used bookstore that has been a bit of a gold mine for vintage aviation and hobby magazines. Okay. Think about living in the middle of the country. Valentine. Are you talking about those little skinny books? Those Valentine books were questionable. Walmart doesn't carry much. Yeah, tell you, when I see guys, you're talking about some of these stores, where they're getting some of the kits. The WalMarts here have not had model kits in like forever. I know that some WalMarts back east and Midwest or whatever, get model kits. We don't get model kits here in Southern California through Walmart. We also got no Ollies either. I see all you guys, raving about these, kits showing up through Ollies and they're awesome and stuff, but no Ollies here. So we don't get those at all. Let's see. Any hobby shops near me? Walmart. Yeah, Hobby Lobby is definitely shifting to very, very heavy on cars and Gundam, man. There's only like two or three airplane kits left. They used to be somewhat balanced, with that, but it's gotten very, very heavy on the other ones. Used to be able to get quite a few, but not anymore. Yeah, Tommy, Buena Park's going to be good. A couple of weeks. The Tamaya International Model Magazine. Oh yeah, I remember that one. Are they still publishing that? I had some Tamaya catalogs from the set from like the catalog number 1 and 2 from the late '60s. Yeah, sold them off a few years ago before I got into doing this stuff. Wish I hadn't done that because they're pretty cool. I still have a couple of them from when I was a kid. So there's like 78, 79, somewhere around there. Probably do a video on that. So Eddie Mouse, yeah, In and Out Burger is a mainstay of Southern California. UK Hobby magazines back in the mid '90s. Back when the magazine cost less than $5. Yeah, I think when you do get magazines now, they're like $10 now. To My Magazine's still going. Yeah, cool. Any other questions or anything, you guys? I go to Hobby Lobby and spend hours advising parents of kids looking to build the first kits. Oh yeah, that's where like these Atlantis repops are really good for that. They're inexpensive. They're easy to build in most cases. So that's something else that um, is great about some of these vintage kits still getting reissued is the ease of build and how good they are for people to ease into modeling. And if your first kit's a Tamiya Corsair, you're going to pull your hair out and throw it against a wall. If that's your first kit. But if you're getting a repop of the 1954 B29 from Revell, anybody could put that together. But I mean, I appreciate that. Yeah, Paul. There's discussion yesterday in Max's live stream about round two acquiring Lionel. And if that was a good thing or a bad thing or what. I guess time will kind of tell on that. I think Atlantis will do a bulk sale of certain kits for you to use at shows for Megan takes. Oh yeah, they do. On their website, you can buy bulk bag kits. They'll also sell off like test shot kits, stuff without boxes, stuff without decals. If you weren't aware, you can also just buy decal only on Atlantis's website. So I've done that for a couple of vintage kits. They're repopping the kit, and you can get the redone decals, and they're really nice for $5. So that's usually one of the challenges that we have with um, with vintage kits is, the kit's still great, but the decals are shot. And when it's these off scale, box scale size stuff, then you're going to end up spending, just as much money on a set of decals. Uh, there's a couple of guys out there that are, repopping, or, printing their own remakes of the old decals, but they're like 17, $18 for something like that, which, yeah, I appreciate you guys doing that. If you really, really, really want to build that kit, that's great. But when I'm spending $10 on a model, and then spending another $17 plus $5 in shipping and all that, now you're talking 20 some dollars to get decals on this stuff. It kind of sucks. But that's where some of the stuff from Atlantis, fortunately they're in most cases when they're doing their reissue, they're reissuing it with the original markings, the original decals, and then sometimes they'll add an additional set, or like say like one of the issues of the B29 that I have, they issued it with all three different sets of decals that Revell had done. So and they're $5, so you can't beat that. That says the value proposition cornered for kits. They domestically manufacture, so there's no tariff. They have over 1,100 molds, and will steadily repop those kits over the next few years. Yeah, I'm really happy with what Atlantis is doing. When they first showed up, I thought, oh, here's somebody else repopping stuff, but they won't stick around. But here we are. They're still doing a lot of really good stuff. Good salesman. As much as like I don't really care for the Gundam stuff, but that may be the thing that saves the model industry, because those things are selling a lot, and it's a good way of getting kids interested in building, and so that may be a segue into building other kits besides Gundam. But those Gundam kits, man, they're selling a ton of those. I wouldn't be surprised if the Gundam kits are outselling, even model car kits. I think model cars are the number one seller in the kit world. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if the Gundam stuff overtakes cars. Yeah, Sarah. There's not a lot of model shops anymore. I try to, when I do go into one, I try to buy something, just to give them some business. Um, but I really don't buy a lot of new kits. But I'll try to get some like glue or something, just to give them some money just to keep them alive. Gundam and miniature war game models are going from strength to strength. Yeah, the like the Warhammer, and a lot of I was at Brookhurst Hobbies a couple of weeks ago, and it seems like like at least a third of the store, maybe even a half of the store now is devoted to various war game stuff. I mean, a lot of fantasy stuff, but even like World War II, or various different wars. And it surprises me like how many different series of these World War II war game pieces, how many of these can exist. But man, there is a ton of the stuff. So maybe that's another element that will keep the hobby shops going, and the industry alive. Yeah, I think a lot of the Gundam stuff is snap tight, right? And they're molded in various colors, so that way you don't have to do much painting to them. So kind of like the old snap type kits that we had in the 60s and 70s. Yeah, I think one of the other things that's affected the hobby significantly is the proliferation of diecast. Um, you know the the quality of the diecast that's available is just amazing, and you can get a shelf model instantly. I mean, granted, some of them are pretty damn expensive, but um, I think a lot of guys are just going, "Oh, why spend the time and effort doing that when I can just buy this diecast thing?" Of course, if you're a true builder, the building is part of it, and you can make it the way you want it to be. But I think the diecast industry, has significantly impacted model kits as well. Um, yeah, I know diecast was really huge in Europe, but it's now become huge, I think, everywhere. Oh, hey, Max. It's interesting that car kits aren't as popular in Europe as they are here. I guess the United States is very much a car culture, so that probably has something to do with it. So Max trying to figure out whether to use the Lindbergh or the Airfix A4. Hmm. Well, I think the Lindbergh's quarter scale, right? And the Airfix is 72nd, unless you're talking about the Lindbergh repop of the IMC, the battle damage one. That's 72nd scale. Um, I don't I don't recall the Airfix how good that one is. I don't think I've ever actually seen that one. I mean, I've seen the boxes of it, but I don't think I've ever um, really looked at it. Yeah, Steve and Any Mouse. I agree with you. It's a different kind of person, that's into one or the other. But I think there's people who have kind of left the building to just do collecting. Yeah, where's Ken? Yeah, he's probably out on the boat. Well, Max, you could do if you did the Lindbergh repop of the IMC, you can include the battle damage parts and make it look like, hey, that's what the Army mechanics, the quality of their repair is. So any mouse, no, this is in the Marine Corps. Steve, that's interesting. Even like going to the kit or going to the model contests and stuff. Um, there may be an element of like attracts like, and certain IPMS groups maybe a little bit more towards cars than other stuff, or some maybe a little bit more aviation oriented, and you kind of want to people tend to want to hang around people that are liking similar things, like attracts alike. And so you may end up where this one IPMS meeting is very heavy into cars, and all the airplane guys aren't going there anymore because it's all about car, and vice versa. And so you may end up with that kind of thing occurring. And those guys forming their own IPMS group somewhere else. I don't know, that might be part of it. I know that overall sales, is still, at least in the U.S., it's still heavily pushed towards cars. But as far as like, the meetings themselves and stuff, and the contests and things, that might have something to do with it. People go to stuff that's more like what they like. So I got another question for you, Steve. So I know that my channel is very much leans towards aircraft. And so I'm not that big in the car world as far as kits go. With a few exceptions that you've seen. But one of the things I've noticed, with current uh, kits that are being made, in the aircraft world, is how much stuff has gone towards larger scale. Um, the 60s, 70s, I mean, 48 scale was about as big as you got. Occasionally you get a 30-second scale. And then, of course, when Revell brought out their 30-second scale series, that kind of opened up the door. Some of the Japanese manufacturers did, but it was all, like single engine fighter kind of stuff. Nowadays, I mean, you're getting stuff. I mean, you got guys who are, companies that are producing, um, B-17s in 30-second scale. You got 24 scale kits, a bunch of those happening now. Uh, so a lot of stuff is going bigger and bigger and bigger in aircraft. Now, I know in the car world, 24 scale, 25th scale, at least for the U.S., those were the two main scales. Occasionally, you get something bigger, like a 12 scale or 16th scale. And I know Europe was very heavy into, like 43rd scale. Um, is there a shift occurring in the car world, the car model world, to going towards bigger kits? Or is there more of these 16th scale, 12th scale, 8th scale car kits coming out the same way that you're seeing that occur in aircraft? Well, hopefully, Steve heard that question. Um, while we're waiting for that, that's something else I was going to show off a little bit. I got these little Solito aircraft. I'm going to hold it up here, which I thought were pretty cool. Kind of like the little dinky ones, the Solitos from France. So, of course, they're French aircraft. This is the Mystère 4. It's pretty neat. And then this one here is the Vautour with the bicycle landing gear and the outriggers underneath the engines. Kind of neat. These things can get really expensive. So larger scale cars are an anomaly. 124, 25th, and 16th are where it's at. Exotic kits, they do 1/8 and 1/12. The reason airplane kits are larger. That's interesting. You'd think that, there would be more of that happening, but guess not. So it's because they sell less, and if you're going to make the mold, you need a big retail to pay for less quantity of sales. Yeah, but see that wouldn't that be true of that's true of any kid? So I think it's strange that the guys who are building model airplanes are going bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're showing out. I know, I've seen like this 32nd scale, B-17 or Lancaster or something like that. I mean, those are $500 kits, and people are dropping the money for it. So, is there are people building cars just not interested in in something big? Or are they just too cheap to buy something big? I don't know. It seems, you why is it that the model airplane guys are going big, but yet the car guys are still kind of staying in that same scale? Yeah, John Ashley, you got some Solitos. All right. Davy, the monogram North African Hurricane. Yeah, with the big 40 millimeter S guns hanging off of it. Yeah, that's a neat kit. Oh, see, see, so that's confusing me even more. So, okay, so a new car kit will sell 25,000 units, and an aircraft will sell 10,000 units. Well, that because cars are more popular, you'd sell more of the cars, which would then kind of bring the price down of those large scale kits. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's maybe it's has something to do with the fact that cars have always kind of been in that scale. I know the beginnings. You had 32nd scale a little bit. You had some 43rd, 48 scale kits, um, but for almost 50, 60, 70 years now, 24 scale has been, kind of 24, 25th scale has been kind of the standard for cars. Whereas aircraft, I mean, they've been all across the board for so many years. And so maybe that's why there's more fluctuation or willingness to go to different scales because, aircraft are, 1/144, 1/100, 72nd, quarter scale. I mean, you got so many scales still in aircraft. Um, so people build cars build a lot, and space is a premium. You could fit a lot more 24 scale cars on a shelf than a 12 scale car. Okay. Oh, Sarah. Okay, that's a good point. The mold process is different. Okay, you're getting a better return on the mold cost at the higher volume. So if the volume is lower, the cost has to be higher, hence the larger scale. Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's another good idea too, Sarah. That cars are all around the same kind of size, right? As opposed to aircraft, and I guess tanks would kind of fit into that as well too. Tanks of all kind of model armor and stuff is kind of settled around that 35th scale as well. I mean, you got 48 scale popping up a little bit, and of course then there's a smaller 72nd HO size. But yeah, I mean, tanks are about the same size as tanks, and trucks and stuff like that. Whereas aircraft, I mean, you got a tiny little aircraft from World War I that's got a 20-foot wingspan, and then you've got 747. So yeah, I could see that having a big factor in it as well too. All right, guys. Well, we've been on here for a little over 2 hours, so I think that's about as long as we're going to go for tonight. Um, I really appreciate everybody that's shown up here the, for this first effort at this. Hopefully, the sound was okay for you. The video is okay. Yeah, I'm just using what's on the laptop itself right now. This uh, seems to be going well. Probably invest in a better camera and microphone for this, and it's also utilizing some of the third party software to be able to bring in other people onto the chat itself. So that way, it's not just me that you're talking to. You can have somebody kind of monitoring as well, and maybe having some more interaction going on. But I think overall this has gone pretty well. So it's definitely worth, I think, doing more of these. So again, thanks so much, guys, for showing up and supporting the channel. And as always, have yourself a great rest of your day or night. Really appreciate it.